again allowing me to be here and to spend the day with you. And for those of you who did not allow it was a discovery in slavery that they realized after the black man would eat, he would go to sleep. They discovered that it's actually in our DNA to respond, to rest. And then they called it niggeritis, right? So those of you who have managed to fight the itis, to be here, to God be the glory. I will not make it worse on you and cause you to buck and to fall asleep. I just want to present something to you, I believe, something that is relevant, that is vitally important, and I believe that the church should be at the forefront of the healing of the nation. Mental health is not a topic, it's not a issue in Congress. It's a human issue. It's a problem that we all face, some more than others. We are infected and affected, and the least, if I could use that word, we can do is to show up for ourselves and understand the question as in, why do I respond the way I do? When I went into mental health, I was sharing downstairs that I did not go into mental health to help anybody. I went into mental health to help me. I was trying to find out, Sister Thomas, what's going on in this mad brain? And the result of answering that question is a ministry that helps others. It's just unique. It's just unique. And so, just a quick, before I get into the presentation, this is, brethren, every time I say it, I feel some type of, something move in my stomach. This is the book that I wrote. Okay, I know you guys just eat, you might be a bit exhausted, but let me say it again. This is a book that I wrote. And it means something because I'm a high school dropout. I was not supposed to be here alive, and worse, to share my voice. Yeah, I'm coming to the name of the book. This book has been years in making. It had taken on many forms until it took on this form. And when it was being published, the publisher sent me a note, a letter, and she said, "Congratulations, high school dropout." That was funny. That was encouraging. In other words, I come to you as exhibit A of what God can do if you but just trust Him. I dropped out of high school. I did 3 weeks in high school. 13 years later. Oh, mighty God. 13 years later, the Lord called me back. And then I had to go back to school. And I said, Lord, but I can't go back to school right now. I would have to go back to no, God. I will preach, but I don't need the degree to preach. Because I refuse to go back to school to sit in classroom with children. As the Lord called me, I needed to go to school. Now, I believed at the time that pastors did not need to go to school. Right? I believe you just call the school that train pastors and tell them that the Lord called you, and they will just help you fulfill the call. So I did just that, call the school and say, hey, guess what? It was West Indies College at NCU. Guess what? God called me to be a pastor. He said, okay, we need your high school diploma. My pastoral life was short-lived because I don't have a high school diploma to give anybody. And then, as you will find in my book, one by the name of Pastor Samuel Telemark. He is the Sabbath School Director for the Inter-American Division of Seventh-Day Adventist. He visited Belize, and I never forget, as he was closing his sermon, he was making a call for pastors. He was making an appeal for pastors because we needed pastors in Belize. Now, I already got off the phone with Jamaica and I know they wanted high school diploma. I will not embarrass myself and join no line and respond to no appeal. And he looked through the crowds of hundreds and he said, young man. And of course, there are many beside me. I did not look. He said, young man, and he pointed, he said, you, yes, come. I said, God, this is public embarrassment. No. And so I got to the altar and he said, the Lord has called you to ministry. I said, whatever, I know what the answer will be. So I'm an electrician by trade, and so I was like, okay, I could finance my own ministry. I could just work hard, get good jobs, and just preach when I'm invited, etc. And the conference in Belize, because of Samuel Telemark, opened a school for pastors. They called me and they said, Jeremy, show up, the dean is waiting. I went there. I did not know where the school was. Like Abraham, I just looked for a city which had foundation. And I got there. I got there late. The dean said, Jeremy, we've been waiting on you. I was one of the two persons who started that program. He said, you're late. He said, where's a high school diploma? In my mind, I said, this again? You guys call me. So I said to him, I don't have it. I don't have. And he said, it's late. Your class is about to begin. Just go into class. Bring it when you have it. And I'm like, this guy is not understanding. It's not that I don't have it on my person, sir. It's non-existent. It's not here. And as I was getting ready to explain and explaining, a voice said, Jeremy, shut up. Real. And I looked around. He said, Jeremy, shut up. Go into class. And I went into the class. And as the class ended, I stopped school. I can't manage these languages and these words. 13 years since I was sat in a classroom. And the class I was sitting in was sociology, with Karl Marx and all these philosophers. And I'm like, nah, Houston, we have a problem. I'm going to stick to John 3:16, and we're going to be all right. I walked out to take the bus back home, and I called my mom to inform my sister to pick me up at the bus stop. And my mom was excited on the phone. He said, Jeremy, boy, I was just telling your uncles and your aunts that you're in school and how proud I am of you. How can I break mommy's heart now and say my school life is over? So I turned back and I spoke with the dean and I said, Doc, this is going to be a rough. He said, Jeremy, I believe in you. 2 years later, I graduated with honors. Thank you. Not without hard work. When my friends, they were playing sports, I had somebody tutoring me high school work in order for me to pass the junior college, the associate degree course, because it was an associate degree program. And so with every breakthrough, just like the manna that God rained down, while it could have been eaten, Numbers 11 said that the children of Israel would pick up the manna and they would grate it and they would make bread. The greatest blessings of God comes through the form of a project. It will never just happen without a type of discipline and a type of reliance on God. After that, I called NCU back 2 years later. And it so happened, fate would have it, that I spoke to the same lady, Ann Thompson, to be exact. And she said to me, she said, Jeremy, I said, check your email. If your email haven't changed, I email something for you. I email something higher than the high school diploma. She looked at it, she saw the grades, and said, this is excellent, but I still need your high school diploma. I said, Lord, I wasted 2 years. And then somebody said to me, said, Jeremy, why don't you go and talk to the principal at the high school you went? By this time, I was doing the week of prayers for the high school every year. So they knew me well. It pays to serve the Lord. And so I went there and I spoke with the principal and I shared with him the situation. And he said, Jeremy, God will hold me guilty if I don't help you. I said, you're right. You're right. He will punish you greatly. Doc, he will. You better help me. And he said, okay, but I need to have my conscience cleared as well. I said, okay. He said, I will give you an exam. If you pass it, you get your high school diploma. I said, all right, give me the exam right now. He said, no, I will give you an outline. You study it, and then you come back. I said, no. You could die on your way home today, and the next principal will not be so gracious. Give me the exam right now. They gave me the exam, and in 45 minutes, I graduated high school. I finished junior college before I finished high school. When I emailed the diploma, signed and sealed to Ann Thompson, she said, Jeremy, I see it signed and sealed, but there is a date discrepancy between the high school and the junior college. I said, Miss Ann Thompson, you wanted a high school diploma, you got your high school diploma, send me my acceptance letter. She laughed, she sent me my acceptance letter. I enrolled there at Northern Caribbean University. I finished my degree there, and I thought that was it. And then a seed was planted, and it was a seed of trauma, planted by a professor who will remain unnamed. That's because I believe we're live, and if he watches this, he will know who he is. And those of my classmates would know who I'm talking about. It was Hebrew class. And when the day before we had an exam, when I completed my exam, I realized that the prefix, because we were dealing with suffixes and prefixes, I realized that the prefix, I did not put those in. But by that time, the paper was filled. So I wrote those on the outside margin. And I explained to him in note that I had forgotten to put these in. And I just wanted him to be aware of it. So the next day when he was returning our paper, I did not like the grade I got. So I said, Doc, I'm not understanding. I believe I got everything right. He said, no, there is no prefix. I said, yes, see all of them right here. And he looked at them and he said, did you just wrote those in? I said, no. I said, the note is there and all of that. And he looked at it and he said, well, if you go to a school like Princeton, I don't think you will be able to handle the academic rigors of a Princeton, and a work like that would be considered sloppy. And I said, Doc, but I am here to learn, and I believe that, a little grace. He said, I grade your work different. Your classmates, I look to see what they have correct. Your paper, I look to see what you have wrong. And I said I will never continue school again. I'm done. And then something happened. The Lord troubled the waters. And I said, but he did mention Princeton. True, this was where Princeton came from. I did not know about a Princeton. I Googled it, and at that time, in 2021, Princeton was doing their slavery audit and tracing back their part and the role they played in slavery. And I was like, anybody that is willing to look in the mirror, I could be a part of. And I applied, and after you submit your application, there is a notification that comes at the bottom and just reminded you how much chance, what are the chances for you to be accepted. It was a 3% chance. And then I look at my last name, I say, it's not Obama, it's not Clinton. Maybe I aimed a bit too high there, wrestling humanly. And then I got a call from Princeton saying, we need an interview with you. Your application was impressive. I started Princeton when I graduated. You guys might call me petty or messy, but there's a reason why I'm saying at the end of the day of my graduation, I took a picture of myself in my graduation gown and holding up my GPA, and I ensured that the person who took the picture zoomed in well on my GPA, and I sent a picture to the professor. And I said, thank you so much, Doc, for your encouragement and your support through. There's a reason I'm going over all of this. There is nothing uniquely special about me. The same grace that the Lord has for me has for every human being. It does not matter how life began. It does not matter what the journey has been thus far. If you dare to believe, God can turn it around. Are you with me? So I managed in my time to write a book. You might hear me say that several times throughout. It's not boasting, it's just not registered as yet. Yes. And so the Lord has been good to me. Shall we pray, Divine Father? Set us free in Jesus' name. Amen. So what I will do, I will do a presentation. I will use my book as the guide. The title of my book is The Imago Dei Interrupted, Turning Chaos into Clarity, Bridging the Psyche and the Soul. It sounds a lot, but it's not as difficult as it sounds. All right? And I just want to make my foundation into, this book has several purposes. Every sale goes to three different things. One, it helps with the recovery of the survivors in Jamaica after the storm. Two, it finances a project that I have in Belize in honor of my sister who died last year from cancer. And three, it helps me to pay tuition to finish my degree at NYU. So every purchase you make is a blessing for more than one person. So you have three options to like. One of them you must like one of them. Now, I was to bring a box of books. The books did not reach in time. I have 12 books with me, but the books, I got notification that the books will not reach until tomorrow. What I can do, I can take the orders and I can just drop them off for those of you who have made orders. Is that all right? Very good. In chapter 1 of the book, that's page 16. And by the way, it was so interesting. I think I should have made it public. The person who wrote the foreword in my book is a Princeton professor who went over the book and saw it worthy enough to add his thought and signature. Isn't that a good thing? I'm just a high school dropout. So in chapter 1, it deals with the question, we have chaos into clarity. I'm so sorry that I broke the pulpit. Things just be sliding now. I am sorry, brethren. I repent of my transgression. I got excited and I just knocked softly and tenderly. And then the result was, I think it needed to change anyway. Let me just get to my presentation here. I just helped somebody to do the obvious. Yes. I want to begin by telling you that chaos is not sin, it's the beginning. And in the beginning, we see God not shunning away from chaos, but God hovering over chaos. It is almost like even chaos have a purpose. Even chaos have a plan. In God's eternal landscape, chaos too have a purpose. I think it's important that I explain the Imago Dei. Genesis 1:26 says, in the beginning God said, let us make man in our image. The Imago Dei is the Latin term for image of God. So really the book, I just wanted it to sound a bit fancy, that's all. The book could have said the image of God interrupted, but you know, I studied theology and it sounds good and all of that. So I said the Imago Dei interrupted. And so the image of God interrupted, it's a Latin term for the image of God, is more than, on page 17, is more than a theological jargon. It is the cornerstone of human dignity. To affirm that we are made in God's image is to recognize that something eternal lives within the temporal, and that every human being, bruised or bold, weak or strong, whole or shattered, bear a sacred mark. Because this truth speaks to the very essence of our existence. It invites the language of ontology, the essence of being, which is the study of being itself. Ontology is necessary here because conversation about dignity, identity cannot rest upon what people do, upon what people achieve or produce, but must begin with who they are at the core of their being. Ontological value means that worth is not conditional or earned. In other words, we don't respect people because they earned it. We respect people because they are a human being made in the image of God. Are you with me? It rests solely on the virtue of existence. You are valuable simply because you are, not because of what you can accomplish. You see, this is where much of our theology and psychology have potential collisions because of the image of God. Because if the image of God were solely based on particular capacities, such as reason, creativity, speech, and ability, then what happens when all of those things and all of these capacities are lost? What about the unborn or the elderly with dementia? What about the person in a coma or a child with severe disability? If dignity is determined by function, then the most vulnerable among us are most disposable. And this is antithetical to the gospel. The image or the imago Dei is not a quality of life or a quality of being. It is a designation. You do not have to be at a particular level to be an image bearer. Image bearing is a quality of human being bestowed by God. To be human at any level is to be an image bearer, the living extension of God. Are you with me? Very good. So, let's talk about the voice within and the silencing of the voice within. There are many voices that speak to us. How do we heal the inner voice? Let me give you a story that will make this a bit more clear. When I was doing my internship at the hospital as a chaplain, I had the opportunity to work with individuals who I have learned a lot from. I worked in the psych ward. And one day I was leaving and I took out my keys from my jacket, and sitting across from me was a man who began to chuckle. And I said, "You're happy that I'm leaving?" He said, "No, I'm not happy that you're leaving. I'm laughing at you." This is a man in the psych ward who has to be constantly restrained and given medication. He's laughing at me. But he's now about to teach me a lesson that I will never forget. I said, "Why are you laughing at me?" He said, "You think you're different." I said, "Me? If you would only know, sir." I said, "But why do you say that?" He said, "Because you have a key. You can leave this facility when you want, and you think you don't belong here with us." He said, "The difference between me and you is that I know I'm sick." In other words, your keys fool you. You belong in the room right next to me. Never forgot. I never forget it. And I said, wow, what a truth. Because we have the opportunity to leave, we think we are good. And if it is true that we can see ourselves in people, my God, he did so. just reach home differently now. Sister Thomas, you have access to maybe I need to enroll in one of them for real. My God. How do we heal that inner voice? The voice that criticizes, condemns. That voice that speaks when we're in traffic and somebody bad drive us. Silent night. No. My mom said, Jeremy, I pray that God don't come when you are in traffic. I said, why would you say that? He said, boy, it will be a hard sell to get you in the kingdom. Because I get miserable in the traffic. But it's not anything that would get me miserable. And it was after my mother said that I did a introspective look. It is when somebody just turned in front of me without signaling. And I remember that I called my therapist and I said, I have a problem. They call it road rage, but I don't think it is road rage. It's something deeper than that. Why when somebody cut in front of me without signaling, I get so angry? And he said, oh, Jeremy, that is clear. That's childhood trauma. I said, what do you mean childhood trauma? He said, was there ever a point in your life growing up when you never had a choice or an option? I said, yes. He said, that's what it triggers. It triggers the moment when nobody asks your input or your permission. They just tell you what you need to do. I said, wow. And that is how important it is to understand who we are and the voices speaking at us. And so when we talk about this inner voice, what are we talking about? Are we talking about ourselves or somebody else? Have you ever having a hard time tell the difference between a child and their parent just by virtue of the language that they choose? It's almost like the child becomes a mirror of the parent. It's almost like when you're talking to a child, the child sounds so mature that you're amazed and say, oh, what a bright child. It sounds good, but is it natural? Or is the child trying to compensate for something? So one of my brothers, God is really good, I went to California the other day. My brother is there. He hadn't been in church because we all dropped out of church. He hadn't been in church for over 20 years. But he's going through a lot. And so I invited him to church. He came with me to church this Saturday, and we stayed all day. And then the Sunday church invited me to preach, and it's the same building. And so we stayed at church the entire Sunday too. And so he said, are you punishing me for all the years I haven't been in church? I said, I don't know how to take it because I preach for every segment. Are you saying my preaching is a form of punishment? And so we laughed. And then he said something to me that changed his life. He said, growing up I hated you. This is my older brother. He's right. I follow him. He's a year older than me. Yes, a year. Mommy makes sure she clock it every year. She's listening, so I'm giving her trouble. Those words penetrated me. I said, why? Growing up, we used to fight a lot because I couldn't accept that he has the right to discipline me. He's only 1 year. No, anybody else could, but him, no. We were too close and we fight all the time. So I thought it was because of that. And then when I know mommy is going to come, I pretend to be Jacob after wrestling, and I begin to walk with a limp, and he would be doubly punished. Because you should take care of your little brother, not beat up your little brother. Got you? So I thought it was that. But he said to me, he said, Mommy used to compare us to you, parents, as motivating as you would try to be, it's damaging. Because I remember she would say, why can't you guys just be like your little brother? And she meant no harm. But the receiver, and he had a problem with me because of what mommy did. Compare and comparison is never good. Every child is unique, and you need to know the language that they speak and help them to articulate in their own language. And we talked about that. And I explained to him that I had nothing to do with that. Even though I said to him it felt good to have you guys looking up to me. It comes at a cost. We laughed. Listen to me now. He is today installed as the deacon of the church. I said to him, when I return, I want to sit down and hear you preach. And he laughed at that one. But there is something I want to share deeper from the book, page 90. I wrote the other day, I overheard someone talking about income. And it struck me that it sounded more like an outcome. If we're talking finances, what we really mean is outcome. The reward of work, the paycheck, the money earned. That's the result of. That's outcome. We call it income. But it's not income, it's outcome. I don't even remember who said it, but I knew that I needed to put my own twist on it. Because in mental health, true income is not what we put in the bank, but what we put in our soul, in our mind. Income is self-worth, self-esteem, self-validation, the adoption papers you sign for your inner child. This is where I will speak for the next 10 minutes. The adoption paper we sign for the inner child. Do you know what depression is? Depression, yes, there are cases where it should be medicated. But depression is a neglected self screaming for attention. It's the body's way of saying to the mind, I am worn down. I cannot carry this weight anymore. How does trauma work with the human mind? Now, trauma is not what happened to you. It's what happens inside of you as a result of what happened to you. So it's the internal response to the external stimuli. That's why if we remember certain things right now, it brings back up a feeling that we had from childhood, from way back. You still get upset about the thing because it's not just the external, it's the internal response as well. And so, when trauma comes, the brain goes into survival mode. And what the brain really does is create a new person to survive that trauma. For example, it's like this. being bullied at school. When I was being bullied at school, couldn't fight, the brain enters trauma. The brain now puts me in survival mode. And the brain says, and this was how we are divinely made. Because if a child or any human being should sit in that trauma, they cannot survive it. So the brain, literally wired by God, goes into survival mode, creates a new journey to survive that trauma until help comes. So when I reach home and I tell mommy that needs to be addressed, if that is not addressed, I stay in survival mode. So I grow up, but there's a part of me that is timid. And for the most part of my teenage years, I was a mute. I would be at church. You wouldn't believe it now that I can't shut up. Not true. Mute. I would reach church and sit down way in the back. I don't want people to even see me. Just sit right down in the back. I still have behaviors when that show up, but it's not because of trauma, it's for other things. But I was a mute. Where did that come from? Nobody saw me. Nobody cared enough to defend me. So just stay out of danger. And the brain keeps you there. So you develop, you get older, but you're socially awkward. There is a challenge when people are around. And if you even get to talk, you talk foolishness. You become the joker. When I went to high school for that 3 weeks, I was the joker. Because I couldn't allow them to see the real me. Now, all of these things are happening unknowing to me in the moment. So it's not like you sit down and say, okay, tomorrow when I reach school, I will be the joker. No. You know that they will ask you your name for you to tell the class what your name and where you come from and all of that. So I begin to joke to lighten the mood so that when it's my turn, it's not as awkward. That's how the brain compensates. And so the brain goes into survival mode. The brain creates a joker. And then I develop a bad temper. That's again, the brain goes, so every time trauma comes, the brain goes into survival mode, creates a new journey to survive that trauma. If that trauma is not addressed, I stuck there. Watch what happens again. If I come upon a different trauma, the brain does the same thing, creates a new journey, and keeps on doing that. Until one day you look in the mirror and you don't recognize who is looking back at you. That's when it becomes problematic and it needs to be fixed. And then it's hard to take accountability and responsibility. Oh, I never did anything wrong in my life growing up. Oh, it's always somebody's fault. I will give you the perfect explanation. Somebody's fault. And we parents hate it. Oh my God. My mom hated nothing more than a perfect excuse. She hates it. Because how could you be so perfect? And then I would whisper silently under my breath, but she would somehow hear. I said, because I'm your son. That's why I'm so perfect. But then there is a clash within. There's a war within. And the brain keeps on surviving until help comes. Then you get married. Huh? Let me pause right here. You get married in survival mode. A person in survival mode, you cannot trust them with the future because they're not thinking about the future. They're thinking to survive today. But yet the choice you're making today has impact on the future. And then you reach in chaos in the marriage and then you said, but what is this? I don't have to tolerate this, and you're gone. Or that's one side, or you stay. You stay and you live in the abuse. Live in the abuse without getting it checked or having somebody help us. You just stay with the abuse. You just say, well, I deserve this. I had a case that was very interesting. Every time the husband would be unfaithful, he left it in his phone. The first time he was caught, the wife went through his phone. So I would assume, sir, I don't even want to say it until I get into trouble. Thank you, Ella. You're a good man, you know. You're a very good man. You're a good man, Elder. Thank you. You saved my soul from hell. And so, when I got to work with him, he never tried to defend himself. Do you know what he was doing? He was setting himself up to get caught. That's his way of crying out for help. But the brain does not know it. The brain is in fight and flight. The brain needs to help this chaos. Oh, just leave it there. When you monitor your child and their room is always messy or too clean, don't scold. Understand what they're trying to communicate. Do you think your child don't know that you will rail up because the room is dirty? They know. But why do they do it? There's a reason there. There is something chaotic in them that they're trying to understand internally. So they put it out externally. There's some people who just have to fight. For no reason them quarrel. They argue. They just have to quarrel. That's an internal chaos coming out. That's the greatest shout for help. Let me give you an example. I was at a church doing a business meeting, and a senior elder got up and decided to just rebuke the young man. And it was in me, there was this clash now. Should I check him and let him know that I am the pastor here? Like it or not, you're stuck with me. Or should I seek to see him? I chose the latter. I said, let me see him. And he was just being very unkind. And then I said to him, when he finished, I said, are you finished? I said, I want you to know that I see you. And I understand. And the chaos you're in, we can pray about it together. Because I hear you shouting for help. I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here to be your friend and help you. I have never seen a grown man cry like that. Bawl like a howling sound. And then he broke down and he said, Pastor, there's a lot going on in my life and nobody understands, nobody cares to understand. Got him. And I couldn't do the business meeting because as he went quiet, our next elder said, it's the same thing happening with me, Pastor. I don't know what's. Then the next elder, then the deacon, and then, so the board meeting turned into a therapy session. When I was leaving from there, they bawled, don't leave. It pays to see people. The greatest pain for every human being is to be unseen. Because the greatest need for all of us is to be seen. The president, you say, I'm very smart. The elder already informed me, so I will call no name. The president, and that is, you can't take me to court for that. The president is doing all that he's doing. Why? To be seen. It's a big child needing mommy and daddy's attention. And when you pull his file and you hear his childhood story, you will understand that that is what he is doing. What do you think is the cause of war? 2 kids fighting. I will show you that I'm stronger than you. So if anything is needed in the world, is a good therapist. Somebody who have access to them and say, listen, I see you. A narcissist just want to be seen. The minute you see a narcissist, he refuses to be a narcissist. It's because you stop seeing me. You're not seeing me. And I will do everything till you see me. I will stop pay the bill. I will stop do this. I will stop do that. Or I will not pick you up from work. Somebody, you better take Uber. Everything. Just for you to say, I see you, and sweetheart, you know you're the best thing since sliced bread. That's all, you know. The greatest pain in the world come from not being seen. That was Satan's problem with God. He said, you don't see me. How can you tell the all-seeing one? And then the greatest need is to be seen. And when we finally see who we really are, we close our eyes because we don't like what we see. Imagine everybody in church decide to come to church just as they are. Chaos. Chaos. So to a degree, we are fashioned to be false. Because you know if you really show up as you are, the very people who say they are your friends will not be. You know how many rooms growing up, I had to go in and leave Jeremy outside to fit in. Because if Jeremy goes in there, the jokes that they give will not be funny. But because the facade go in there, and the joke's not funny. But you need to fit in. Survival mode. You start from home. You play ball, you do well, parents give you a treat. If you're the troubled one, you get scolding, so you learn to adjust. ADHD, you know what ADHD is? It's suppressed childhood trauma. Mommy shout at you and you shout back and you get 2 slaps. 2 bucks. And then you ask, yes, but you have to discipline a child. Yes, but that child needs to understand why. And say, okay, why did you shout back at me? And if that child says, because you shouted. Do you know shout does not mean you're in control? Shout means you have just lost control. My mother was the most dangerous woman when she is silent. I prefer when my mother shouts. Because the minute she goes silent, don't worry, the judgment is set and the books are about to be opened. And it's the same thing with God, you know. There was a 400-year period between Malachi and Matthew. When God goes silent, it's trouble. I prefer to have God miserable with me than for God to go silent. Because, and then it plays out in relationships. Husbands and wives quarrel and they just walk past each other in the same house like they don't see each other. That sends a message that you don't exist. Put the body in survival mode. And then we come to work, we go to church in survival mode. Chaos happens. Why? Nobody solves. No wonder Jesus' ministry was a ministry of seeing. So let me read this and then I will open for questions here. Let me Yes. Income is the signing of the adoption papers for the inner child in us. Without that, all the hustling in the world is deficit spending. We need more outcomes, but we really need is income. Too many live empty despite abundance because their words betray them. I'll never be free. I can't change. This is just who I am. In Jamaican parlance, a somistie. In that moment, they have already written tomorrow's script. You rob tomorrow with that statement of today. We mistreat others, we orphan others, because we ourselves have lived as orphans. We place them in deficit because the deficit within still rules us ourselves. But once I chose adoption, when I decided to choose to sign the adoption papers. And how did I do that, you might ask? And I close with this. I was going to therapy and I was not getting through. They were doing all the right things, but there was just something that was missing and I didn't know what it was. And I remember saying to my therapist, I said, you need to do your job. You need to find out what that thing is. And he said to me, I can only go as far as you will allow me to. And that's when I realized there is a part I must play in my own healing. And when I decided to open up about my greatest fear, my greatest pain, that behind the loud preaching and the strong personality is still a fragile kid who never got the embrace he needed. And so, as things begin to look like it's going downhill, I'm the first to go. I'm gone. The Lord has spoken. Jeremy gone. Because the inevitable will happen in my mind. Watch this. What is the inevitable? You will leave. So guess what happened? I will leave first. That means I orphan myself in order to orphan you. We don't just mistreat people without an expense, without a cost. We mistreat people because we first mistreated ourselves. Hence, Paul always bring it back to ourselves. Would you harm your own body? Because the hand cannot say, I have no need for the foot, etc., etc. We're all one body. And this is what the healing is to recognize that we are all one. And so, I remembered my journey to healing was I needed to talk to a little boy. Ooh. I went into the room in the psych ward, and there was a man on suicide watch, and he said, leave. You dress like people who cause me harm. You dress like my abusers. Leave. Oh, but I'm the chaplain. Worse, leave. There is no God. I didn't ask for no chaplain. I said, it's a prerequisite. Once you're here, you have to leave. And he chased me like a dog. I went outside. I'm ashamed. And then the voice said, but why are you ashamed? We personalize everything when we're in survival mode. Everything somebody does is directly at me, and then we become the victim of somebody else's own story. Has nothing to do with us. That's the first sign that you're in survival mode and you're not living. It's time to start living. And so I stepped outside and I called my supervisor, and he said, Jeremy, you need to go back. You need to find out why he hates God. I said, Doc, that's a madman in there. He will hurt me. And he said, you will not hurt you. And he hung up the phone. I went back in. I took off my jacket. I rolled up my shirt sleeve. I took off my tie. And then I went back to the door and I said, hi, John Doe. He looked at me from head to toe. And he didn't chase me because I took off what reminded him of the people who harmed him. Are you with me? And so I said, I'm here to learn from you. You said something that I believe in. But I need you to help me because I can't understand. He said, what's that? I said, you said there is no God. I believe you. I believe there is no God. But why do you believe that? And he began giving me a story. That story destroyed me into 1,000,000 pieces. And in short, he has been in the system from the age of 12. His father used to abuse him sexually when he would drink. Now his little sister is now 5 years old, and daddy turned his attention to her. And it would happen when he drinks, and mommy would not defend them. And he heard his father come in. The vehicle was speeding, the tires, he hearing it. And when his father stopped, his father was calling his daughter, the 5-year-old. He, knowing what would happen, took the little girl and ran to the back through some bushes. And she got cut on her leg. So she began screaming. And he covered her mouth, stifled her to death. He said, so Jeremy, don't tell me anything about love. It was love that incarcerated me. Don't tell me anything about God. And while I'm there, I am praying. I say, God, if I am your attorney, you just lose this case because I can't defend you here. You need to show up and defend yourself. And he told me how his mother testified that he deliberately killed his little sister out of fear for his father. He went to the hostels at the age of 18, went to prison. He has spent 37 years in prison. Came out to the death of his parents. And now he's on suicidal watch. Then he looked at me and said, now tell me, where is God? Anything I say can and will be used against me. Now is no time for Bible study. Nobody cares about what John or Peter says. His lived experience is more than what John and Peter could say. And I said to him, with tears running down my cheek, we were told we shouldn't be in there crying. Wrong man. You know, it's funny though. I couldn't cry for years. I buried my sister and my brother, churched them, put them in the earth and couldn't cry. Couldn't cry. Didn't want to cry. I'm a man. When I got healing, I cry for anything. Don't stare me too hard, I start bawl. I had to go to my therapist and say, Brethren, I don't know what's going on. Can't be bawling every minute. Just walking through life crying. He said, what is your name? I said, Jeremy. He said, okay, Jeremiah, you are the weeping prophet. But healing makes us vulnerable. And in the world of trauma, vulnerability is enemy. But when you heal, it's. So I broke down in there, praying that my supervisor would not come in and find me. Because that's a fail. You don't fail, go home. And I said to him, I don't know where the question came from. I know it was God. I asked him, I said, were you able to do classes while you... He said, yeah, it was the prerequisite. Because of my age, I had to go through school. I said, really? I said, what did you study? He said, film writing. He always wanted to be in Hollywood. I said, wow. Because I wanted to be an actor in Hollywood too. I would give Denzel Washington a run for his money. He said, then why didn't you? I said, I don't have somebody to write. He said, do you have the movie? I said, I have it right in my head. And I told him the story of a little boy who was abused, beaten, but joined the military and was chosen for a secret mission, and he had to go and rescue a little boy. And when we got to the part, he's writing, when we got to the part where he met the little boy, he dropped the pen and the iPad, and he bawled, curled up in a fetal position. Nurses ran in and doctors with syringe. I said, no, don't, leave him. Balled up in a fetal position. And the voice of God said to me, Jeremy, he's been born again. He bawled for nearly 1 hour. Then he sat up, he dried his tears, picked up the notepad. I said, what happened just now? He said, that little boy is me. I said, so how will you rescue that little boy then? He said, I don't know. I said, you need to tell him the story. You need to convince him to trust you. You need to rescue him, because remember, there is no God. You need to now rescue him. So tell him the story. I walked out from there in pieces. Because in his story, I found the little boy that was left abandoned here. I got in the vehicle and I parked 3 hours and bawled. Called the therapist and said it to him. And he said, Jeremy, then tell the little boy the story. And for me, that looked like standing in front of the mirror and tell this boy that was told he will not be anything. He's a cross, he's a misfit, he's a waste of time, he's a demonic spirit from hell. You will never be anything in life. You're a mistake, you're a crosses, And I had to look this little boy in the eye and say to him, it's a lie. You're at a good school now. You have done X, Y, and Z. To the degree that today I still do it. When I was graduating from Princeton, I was in the bathroom, in front of the mirror, telling the little boy he's graduating today from good school. They were calling my name outside. I didn't hear. I busy in the bathroom talking to the little boy. You're in good school, remember? Remember they said that you will not be anything? Well, no, when they meet you, they have to stand up and shake your hand, boy. And I'm having big conversation. The professor came in and said, Arnold, how long will they be calling your name out there? I said, sorry, Doc, I was talking. And when I was running past him, he stopped me. He said, was the conversation good? There is a conversation. The healing of the inner voice is the healing of the inner child, whom you and I have abandoned in ourselves. You heal that inner child by conversing with that inner child. Tell the inner child the story that you're not a mistake, you're not a misfit. As a matter of fact, this is what you have accomplished. And allow yourself to grow up without the applause of somebody else, because you can be your own cheerleader. That's the alarm right there. We planned that together, that alarm there. Is there any question for me?
So what we're going to do is we're going to ensure from Elder Alvaranga that we're not online, because we want some authentic, organic conversations. The questions will not be online, once again, just so you're comfortable. You can ask for a friend. You can ask for a neighbor, right? You can ask for someone in the back.